The world around us is hostile to the Word of God and to biblical values, but we are called to be salt and light, to stand for truth in a decaying culture. We are not called to run from the fire, but be willing to step into the fire. God has placed you at this time in history on purpose and for a purpose. Join us as we get better equipped to address civics and culture from a biblical worldview. Welcome to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church. Let's welcome our hosts, Debi and Sam.
Today's topic is life, law, and liberty, and we're joined by our special guest, Kevin Theriot, who's a senior counsel at ADF on part of the Life team. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for being here and having this podcast. I've heard good things about it, and I was telling some of my friends I'm going to be on. They say, "You are?" I said, "Yeah."
Well, we're glad we gave you some street cred.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So if you could just introduce yourself, because you're who you are, a little bit about your family, your background,
Sure.
Being from Arizona, whatever you want to share with us on a personal level, and then we'll get into our topic.
So probably most importantly, I should say that I've just had 2 new grandbabies in the past month. So the 23rd, my son had a little boy named Will, and he and his wife Grace are just doing a great job. We got to spend some time with him last couple weeks. And then my daughter, just Saturday night, she and her husband Miles just had a little girl.
Wow.
Kate. Her big brother calls her Tate. Tate. So that's how she's already got a nickname.
That's so
and then
cute.
I have 4 grandkids here, and so I've got 14 down to 0.
Wow.
7 grandkids. So that's really one of my primary responsibilities now. I'm married to my lovely wife. It's been 33 years,
Wow.
Suzanne, and we have been doing nonprofit, religious liberty, pro-life, pro-family legal work most of my career, and it's been just a real privilege to do it. It's when I tell people the story of how I got to do it, it's just amazing. It's always easier to see God's hand when you're looking backwards,
Right.
and you think,
Yes.
"What is going on?" And you look backwards and you think, "Oh, I see. God was working on that."
Yeah.
And that's true in my life, and it's been true in a lot of my cases, and so I've been with Alliance Defending Freedom for almost 25 years. It's
Wow.
20. Well, I say that 20. It's been 22 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, since 2000 and when was 2003?
Okay.
So that's 22 years. So
Yeah.
so anyway, thanks for having me on, and I love to get to talk about this kind of stuff. I mean, this is what I do.
Yes. Well, excited.
And ADF is based out of Scottsdale, right? Is that the home base kind of?
Yes.
Okay.
It was founded about 30 years ago by Alan Sears, and it was from here, and so that's where it started.
Yeah.
And we have most of our executive team now is in Northern Virginia outside of D.C., and we also have an office in Atlanta, and then we have several offices worldwide. There's an
Yeah.
ADF International that does life, liberty, and family work all around the world.
I think I just saw an article about somebody being arrested or something, and somebody from ADF, like in another country. But yeah, so I know that there's stuff going on all over the world.
Yeah,
So-
a lady was arrested for thinking pro-life thoughts
Right.
outside of
How dare she?
an abortion clinic in the UK. So yeah.
Yes. How dare she think?
Yeah.
Right? Like.
Thank God we're not there yet.
Well,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
goes
Yes.
into what we're talking about today
Yeah.
too, of like we're not that far away if you don't keep up the pressure and keep the right people in office and all of that. We could very easily head that way because a lot of the world is doing that kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah. So
All right.
great
ready to-
segue into
Yes.
the conversation.
Into ADF and all of the cases that you handle, because there's multiple teams that we've talked about. So to kind of simplify it for our listeners, there are 2 basic types of cases that you handle, kind of like one, either a government entity passes a law or enacts a policy that is hostile to religious liberty or the protection of life, and a person or an organization sues to end that.
That's one bucket. Yes.
One bucket,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I know, I'm trying to,
Yeah.
it's a lot. And then the second, what we would consider good, perhaps like pro-life legislation or policies that are enacted, and a person or entity tries to sue that or take it down.
Right, and ADF gets to step in and defend the government in those situations, like we did just this past term for South Carolina, who defunded Planned Parenthood. We defended South Carolina's law.
Okay, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So can you walk us through a basic process of how a case might make its way through various courts?
Sure.
For one of these.
Sure. I think a great example is one Debbie and I have been talking about, and that is the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe and how that came to be and what the process was. But, for 50 years, the Supreme Court had determined that you couldn't restrict abortion before viability. So that's about 22 weeks gestation. And states were just handcuffed. There were some limited things they could do. And so ADF is actually very involved in part of the process of trying to come up with a strategy for getting the court to move that line back from viability maybe to 15 weeks, all the way back to let states regulate abortion from
conception.
So anyway, in that particular instance, we put together a team that drafted a model bill that Mississippi and several other states adopted, something like it. It's never exactly the same because it has to go through the legislative process. And once they enact that, then this law was put in place because we thought the Supreme Court might roll back Roe v. Wade to at least 15 weeks, where all the dismemberment, very dangerous abortions start. And Mississippi enacted it. Arkansas enacted a similar one. Utah enacted a similar one.
Arizona did at one point too,
yes.
but not or later on. Yeah.
Right. And they had a 15-week law for years and years. And then in the Supreme Court, we were thinking might take one of those cases eventually. And lo and behold, the court took the first one. Mississippi was the first one. So it was enacted. Jackson Women's Health, an abortion clinic there in Mississippi, challenged it. They won at the trial court, and the judge there at the trial court was just very critical of Mississippi. Oh, you're sending women back to, the slavery days, just crazy stuff. Yeah. And then went up to the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit said, we got a good opinion there from the Fifth Circuit, said, well, basically our hands are tied. And then we asked the Supreme Court to review it, thinking the court might take it. And sure enough, the court took it. And then the AG of Mississippi, the recently elected AG of Mississippi, appointed a very pro-life Solicitor General, the one who argues before the Supreme Court. And they championed that case and said, we don't want to just roll back Roe a little bit. We want to overturn it. They led with that argument, and the Supreme Court did it. So that all started at the state level.
Yep.
And it had state officials involved, and that went all the way up through federal courts, two levels of appeal to the Supreme Court, all because a legislator had the guts to propose a law that didn't comply with Supreme Court ruling, but they thought it could be used as a tool to overturn it.
Yeah. So and I think that's an important piece of it too, because you see that where it's like they'll test things, right? Both sides do this. They do it on the pro-abortion side as well, and in other arenas too. But testing kind of these laws to see if it'll get challenged, thinking that something will get challenged to try to hopefully make it get to the Supreme Court to make a big change in law. Right. Yeah. So how long did that process take? Like for that specific one, that one seemed to happen pretty quickly. But from like getting that legislation drafted and passed in Mississippi to it being ruled on at the Supreme Court.
It took about 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, which is relatively quick.
That is relatively quick.
And we when we were talking about this at the on the life team at ADF, we were thinking this is sort of a 10-year plan. We'll go up, maybe we'll get them to roll it back, and then we'll have to go up again, and it'll be sort of a 2-step process. And God had very different plans.
Yeah, right. It was amazing.
It went quickly, and the court did it right away.
And it was
very
decisive.
Decisively, yes.
It wasn't, because like what you were saying, I remember when that was happening, because there was, some conversation and argument and things that go on, at the state level. But about when Arizona was passing their 15-week law, why we didn't do it. It was because it was part of that process of trying to get that challenge, because they weren't sure whether it was going to be a 15-week
Right.
or if it was going to overrule it completely, or they weren't going to do anything. Like, you don't know how
That's
it's
right.
going to land, and so you kind of have to hedge your bets a little bit and have a couple of different options in play so that you can, okay, if we get it down to 15 weeks, great, we have a 15-week law, and if we don't, then we have other things going on. But
And one great thing that happened in Arizona when they passed that 15-week law, they put in language in there that says we're not saying there's a right to abortion. We're
Right.
just trying to do as much as we can to regulate it. And that statement was very key when when Roe was overturned and the Supreme Court of Arizona got to decide, hey, we get to go back to the law before Roe came into play, and that was there were basically no abortions
Right.
in Arizona.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and then that was that whole battle too. But yeah, I don't think people understand how big of how many things are involved in all of that process and how many places it ends up. I mean, because it's state legislatures, it's an attorney general at a state, it's a governor that has to sign the law into place in the first place, and state level courts and appellate courts and
Right.
like all of these different levels, and a whole lot of different people giving testimony, giving information, being, stakeholders in that process. It's a very big, and most of it goes on underneath where nobody even, except for like me, who's a junkie for that stuff. I pay
Right.
attention to it, but most
Until
people don't
you read
even
the headline of like what's
Right.
been done or what's going on. You don't know.
Roe v.
really.
Wade was overturned, and it was like,
Yeah.
that just happened easy, right? Well, no.
Yeah, but it
That's what
goes,
a lot of Christians thought, I feel like.
right. Well, and part of it was this was something God had in the works,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
people have been praying for 50 years.
Yes.
So he allowed us to be a part of it. There's no
Right.
question about it. This was I think this was part of God's sovereign
agree.
plan, and there wasn't anybody who was going to get in the way of that
Yeah.
because of the faithful people praying
Yeah.
for years and years and years. But I think you put your finger on something about the attorneys general. It really, even a state attorney general, used to be, we had a pro-life attorney general, Mark Brnovich, and he was very aggressive in defending their pro-life laws.
Yeah, he did a great job with
Right,
that.
but then when we don't have a pro-life attorney general now, and she was not even defending the pro-life laws. So ADF actually had to step in and help defend those because the attorney general wouldn't defend them.
Right.
So it shows you that elections matter.
Yeah. And we're going to talk, I think, some about that too, but with that, but also the attorney general then in our state level has signed on to some terrible things where they're trying to overturn laws in other areas, especially a lot of the immigration things in LGBTQ arena, and they're signing on. So that attorney general really does have a lot of power, and I don't think people pay much attention to the state level attorney general race.
Right.
So yeah, and it is crucial.
Yes.
Yeah.
So pro-life pregnancy centers have been under attack in multiple states. Can you highlight how ADF is fighting to protect the work of pregnancy centers?
Sure, and that is a great segue because the attorneys general in a lot of different states, and including, I believe, Arizona's attorney general, have signed a letter that said pro-life pregnancy centers are evil institutions trying to deceive women. And that has been used as the basis for enacting laws in some states that specifically target pregnancy centers. For example, Vermont. Vermont has a pro-abortion attorney general. She championed a bill based largely on this letter that cited some just basically unprovable accusations against pregnancy centers in other states, not even in Vermont.
Yeah.
And used that to say, draft this piece of legislation that says pregnancy centers are evil, they're deceiving women, and targeting pregnancy centers. And so we filed a lawsuit on behalf of NIFLA and several pregnancy centers in Vermont. And the case was NIFLA versus Clark, Attorney General Clark.
What does NIFLA stand for?
NIFLA is National Institute for Family and Life advocacy. So I have to
Your
think about
Jeopardy
it.
question.
Yeah, that's why I always say NIFLA, because I can't remember.
But I don't think most people have ever heard of NIFLA.
Yeah.
So they're a umbrella organizations for pregnancy centers that really helps pregnancy centers become more medical and do abortion pill reversal kind of things and do ultrasounds especially. That's their primary. So
Right.
they're very helpful with instead of pregnancy centers just maybe doing pregnancy tests and providing clothes and baby items. They can take the next level up, and NIFLA helps them do that. Well, they represent they are in a lot of cases. We've
Right.
represented
Imagine.
NIFLA on a lot of stuff, but in that particular case, we sued, and of course, the Attorney General said, "Oh, there's nothing to see here, Your Honor," and asked the court to throw the case out. The judge, who was an Obama appointee, said, "No, it sure looks like to me that you're targeting pregnancy centers.
Wow.
I'm going to let this case go forward." And as a result of that, the Vermont legislature changed the law and took out all the targeting language about pregnancy centers, about how they were so bad, and made it apply to every medical provider.
Wow.
So that's a great example of the attacks and what can be done to stave them off.
Yeah. That's just crazy. Yeah, because I remember is that the letter, is that separate from the consumer alert that the Attorney General put out here in Arizona? Because I know there was a consumer alert,
yes.
but then I think I was saying how she's been signing on to these letters that
Yeah.
a whole bunch of Attorney General, is it Attorneys General?
Attorneys General, yeah.
I always,
General.
it's like, is it Attorney Generals or Attorneys General?
Attorneys General.
Okay.
Just say AGs. if you would.
AGs. That's so much easier, like NIFLA, right? Okay.
Yes.
But the AGs, a lot of them will get together and sign on to a joint letter and say, we're going to kick and scream about this specific thing
Right.
that we don't like. So in pregnancy centers, as a side note, Kevin and I both serve on a board for choices for the pregnancy centers here in Phoenix. But so we're active in that work as well. But the pregnancy centers, there's a wide array of what they do. Like you were saying, some of them just give out diapers and help moms, which any level of that is fantastic. They all have their purpose, and some of them are more medical, but they want to target them and say that they're fake clinics. They don't do any, it's fake science. They try to shame women into, not choosing an abortion, and
Or they don't do abortions.
Right.
But you know what? Only like 87% of OBGYNs don't do abortions.
yeah,
But they provide everything else
right.
in child care. I mean, taking care of women that are pregnant. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it shows you just how it's a double standard.
Well, and
Oh,
I think too, there's
100%.
and I think that's why they do those letters,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
then they can use them to test the waters again, like we were saying. There's also a case in New Jersey, right?
Yes, there's a case in New Jersey where the Attorney General there, Attorney General Pratkin, I believe is his name, started investigating a pregnancy center, First Choice, and based upon these allegations, that from this letter that had nothing to do with New Jersey, never been any complaint about First Choice there, and did a subpoena for all their donor records, all their proprietary information, and basically just lawfare that we've been hearing about in news against the pregnancy center, trying to distract it from doing the great work that it's doing, and maybe even having to hire an attorney to defend them. The good news is ADF was able to come in and we can represent them for free because of our generous donors. But they were trying to shut them down by doing this, by just handcuffing them with having to produce thousands of pieces of paper electronically and to disclose their donor names. And so what happened was we filed a lawsuit and said, no, you can't do that. You're violating our First Amendment rights. And the Attorney General said, no, you have to just go through you have to disclose everything, and then we'll decide later if any of your rights are violated. And of course, by that time,
Right.
the genie's out of the bottle, or the
Right.
toothpaste out of the tube, or whatever analogy you want to use. And so that case is actually before the Supreme Court right now, whether or not the federal court can hear before they have to disclose all this stuff, whether or not he's targeting them and violating their rights. So that case is coming up. It's being briefed right now.
Wow. And so it's there. So have you gone and spoken in front of the Supreme Court?
Have I?
Yeah.
I've been to the Supreme Court many times, and I got to sit at the table next to the guy who spoke, but I never got to say anything except when I was sworn in.
When you were sworn in.
Yeah, I said, "Thank you, Your Honor."
There you go. So you've spoken before the Supreme.
I have. That's
You've
right.
spoken before the Supreme Court. There we go. That counts. But yeah, that's just bananas. Like to have to give up all that and for no reason at all,
Right.
Other than they just want to be.
Oh, yeah.
To distract you from doing the good work.
And that is an important point too, because when you admire somebody in all of this legal, it all is expensive. You know, it's very expensive, and I think that's a big part of it. It's sucking up time and money and resources, so that they're not doing the work that they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. Yeah. And if they put enough legal pressure on them, they can put them out of business.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
And then before we go on to the next one too, I have and I'm trying to remember what state it's in, but I think it's in that same area, Vermont, but where they were trying to, it was like a false advertising.
Yes, so New York. In New York, the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, she's been in the news a lot lately.
Right.
Obviously very hostile to anything that's anybody who's pro-life. She sued several pro-life organizations for advertising abortion pill reversal. Basically saying you're deceiving women into thinking that they can actually reverse their abortion. And of course, she ignores studies that say that if you take progesterone after the first, abortion pills is a 2-pill regimen. You take the first pill, the first part of the drug. If you take progesterone, it can counteract that up to 65, 67% of the time. And there are studies and that show that. I have a client who's done it many times and been successful about 67% of the time.
Right.
It actually, it's proved up. So they filed a lawsuit against pregnancy centers, drug them into court because they're saying you're deceiving consumers. We actually filed a suit on behalf of pregnancy centers, again, NIFLA, that weren't part of that lawsuit, and actually got an injunction against Attorney General James, and that is on appeal to the Court of Appeals in New York City right now.
And again, just saying that it's like if you're not saying what we want you to say, and what does that mean? How do you determine whether something is false advertising? Like what's the criteria, right? There's no.
It's crazy. They say so. The way this works is you take that first pill if you're a woman trying to do a chemical abortion, and that blocks progesterone. Well, all abortion pill reversal is it loads the mom's system up with progesterone and stops the effect of that pill and keeps the baby alive. Doesn't starve the baby from progesterone. And Attorney General James said, well, that's not really reversing an abortion. That's deceptive. You're not reversing. Well, then what is it? I mean, it's crazy, but they're obviously just straining out gnats and slicing it so thin just because they disagree with our message.
Right.
Well, and that's where these cases really do have and I think this is not on one of the questions, but it seems to me like a lot of the cases, whether they're life-related cases or immigration-related cases, a lot of times the other side, right, they specifically target in appeals court areas where they think it might be friendly to them. So they'll do something specifically in a state where they think they have a really good shot of getting it to go forward, right?
Yeah. You see a lot of lawsuits on the coasts.
Right.
Yeah.
Where it's more friendly to crazy.
So we're talking a lot about the abortion pill reversal. Can you tell us what's happening in Colorado?
Sure. So Colorado is the only state that I'm aware of that banned abortion pill reversal. So the abortion lobby is very upset about abortion pill reversal. It's really unclear exactly why. You would think if you're pro-choice, you would want a woman to have a choice to maybe stop a chemical
Right.
abortion once she started one. But
I have
I
my
think
own theories on that. But
well,
know.
you go ahead. You want to opine before I go?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I think a big part of it is that it's like the fact that women change their mind in that quick of a time tells you that they're not really giving them informed consent, and that there's pressure there to do that. Otherwise, why would you change your mind within the 24-hour, 48-hour window that you have to move to do the reversal? It really does shed a light, because they want to say that, oh, women are always happy with that. They're never like, it's a messaging problem for them, because they don't want to make it sound like women are not informed or they change their mind. So then they don't want to admit that it's ever an issue of changing their mind.
Or that they wouldn't be happy with abortion.
Right.
You know,
That
they
they
have,
would-
yeah.
they've
Yes.
trumped up all these studies that say, oh, women are always happy with
Right.
abortion. You know, it's kind of like
Shout
getting
your abortion.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
but so they banned it, and we filed a lawsuit. We filed a lawsuit along with our friends at the Beckett Fund, who represent Bella Health. Our client is Chelsea Minnick. So they filed the initial lawsuit and got a judge to put that on hold because it violates free exercise rights. Well, in the meantime, our client, Chelsea Minnick, is a nurse practitioner, was helping a mom reverse her abortion and gave her progesterone, and it worked. Well, a family member of the mom found out about it. She's extremely, avidly pro-choice and pro-abortion, filed a complaint against her with the nursing board. And so she filed a complaint. So we had to get involved in the lawsuit. So we got involved in the lawsuit, got an injunction on behalf of her. And then just the first of this month, we got a definitive ruling saying that the law violates our clients' freedom of religion, because their religious convictions, they're both religious providers, Bella Health is and Chelsea Minnick is. They have religious conviction to do everything they can to help women not have an abortion.
Right.
And progesterone is part of that provision. And because that's the only regulation of progesterone that
Right.
Colorado has. They let it be used for all kinds of different things, but they singled out these people who are providing it as part of their religious convictions for regulation. And the Supreme Court is very clear, you can't do that.
Right. It makes no sense.
No.
Like, just logically, it doesn't make any. That's crazy that it was a family member. It was like, okay, so
Yeah.
we're upset that this baby was born,
Yeah.
so we're gonna sue the person who helped make sure that this child.
Well,
can,
they filed an anonymous complaint.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
Well, and progesterone, like that. One of the things, this is what I always bring up, that progesterone, like they've been pushing the abortion lobby, and all of the activists in that arena have been for years pushing the O pill and things like that it's over the counter progesterone only birth control that they want to be available at like CVS, Walgreens, where you can just walk in, anybody can take this, like these are contraceptive pills that are just progesterone. So they're safe to do that. Over the counter, any age can take progesterone, like in their world, right? They're
Yeah.
pushing this, but then it's dangerous to give them progesterone. Never mind the fact too that progesterone is used to help women who've had multiple miscarriages. It helps them manage pregnancy to make sure that they don't miscarry another pregnancy. It's used in hormone replacement therapy for different reasons, all kinds of
Combat
things,
PMS.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's used for a lot of different things, and it's a naturally
Naturally
substance
occurring
you're
hormone.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
So it is crazy that, like, okay, we can use it in all these other places, but not there,
Right.
because we don't like that.
And that's what the judge zeroed in. He said,
Well, that's
he said-
good,
He
yeah.
said, come on.
Yeah.
Is basically what he said. You're making this stuff up.
Yeah. Well, and Colorado didn't used to be that far, right? Didn't they used to be more of a red state, like a
Yeah,
conservative?
I mean, always had pockets that were very blue, like Boulder and
Right.
all the university towns.
But it seems like here lately, there's all these
yeah.
crazy laws that have come out of California.
Yeah.
I mean, not California, Colorado, but
Colorado.
they're basically,
they're giving California a run for
They
their money.
are,
But it's
yeah.
true. I think there's been a lot of migration from California to Colorado, and I think the legalization of marijuana has tended to influence it to become more blue.
Yeah.
Because of they call it the green the green wave or the green rush.
Okay.
The green rush.
Instead
all
of
the
like
people
a gold
that,
rush.
yeah, because Colorado was one of the first to do it. So
Right. You mean that isn't like really good for society and makes everything better?
sure does stink a lot. I can tell you that. It makes it more smelly.
It does make it more smelly. I don't even
I
like
thought
like
it was a skunk the first time I ever smelled
A skunk
it.
smoking
Yeah.
a cigar.
I
That's what it
was-
smells like.
That's a good description.
well, and in DC, the subways and all they just reek all the
yeah.
time. That's it's terrible smell. Yeah.
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 All right, that was my last question.
Okay. So in talking about this, are there what you were another one? So we were talking earlier about the contraception cases, and so we were talking about how the Dobbs case happened in 5 years, but there are other cases that can bounce around and take years and years and years and years sometimes to go through, right? Because you have cases that have been 10, we were talking about one earlier that was 10 years, right? Have there been ones that have been longer than that, kind of bouncing back and forth, or
So
put you on the spot?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one longer than 10 years. I'm sure there have been. I think the recent defunding of Planned Parenthood by South Carolina, that case was around for about 10 years. Went
Wow.
up to the Supreme Court twice, I think. So appealed.
So how does that happen? So it goes up and then it gets bounced back
Yeah.
down? Because they refuse to see it or say that it needs to be dealt with more down at a lower level? How does that work?
So what happens is they'll say, you got it wrong. The Supreme Court will say, well, send it back down, and you need to try again. And the appeals court or even the trial court will come to the same conclusion. And then and they'll say, well, yeah, the Supreme Court said we got it wrong, but we can think of some other reasons why we got it right. And then you have to go back up. And there's no guarantee that the Supreme Court will hear your case. I mean, they take less than 10% of the cases that come before them. And so the lower court judges are sort of banking on that. So maybe we can get away with this one. But the one we were talking about earlier was back when the Affordable Care Act was first enacted, Obamacare, most people know it as. They required employers to cover contraception, including abortion-causing drugs. That are drugs that could be abortifacients, like the pill that you were talking about.
Right.
And there are a lot of pro-life organizations, many of them Catholic, who don't want to do that. And so there was some litigation about that.
Well, because like one of them was the Little Sisters of the Poor,
Yeah,
who are
Little
a
Sisters
bunch
of
of
the Poor.
nuns, and
Yeah.
they're trying to force them to fund contraception
Right.
and abortion.
And included in their employee benefit plan.
Right.
Yeah, we're
a
not
whole
doing
group
that.
of nuns,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like that. How does that make any?
So-
There was the one that I remembered specifically.
Oh,
because
yeah.
It was just crazy how, but that was in Obamacare. They were trying to force them to
Right.
fund it, so they
So there's a
challenge
lot
it.
of litigation about that. And then Trump took office the first time in 2016, and he put some regulations in place that protected them and protected non-religious pro-life organizations like March for Life and Students for Life of America that are just pro-life. They're not religious. And then Biden won, and he said, I'm gonna go back to the original regulations. And so those cases got put on hold, and then Biden lost, and he never did change the regulations. So now the cases are back up again. So we were just talking about it because I just had a hearing in a case in California where we represent March for Life, where they're trying to defend the Trump era regulation that expands the protection and says, no, if your religious convictions or your moral convictions
Right.
say you don't want to cover something in your employee benefit plan that might promote abortion, then you don't have to. And that's just common sense.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's a really important distinction because a lot of those, they want to carve out religious liberty, which is important. So you have things like that pharmacists can't, don't have to be forced to, or any kind of medical provider it doesn't have to be forced to participate in an abortion, to perform an abortion, to
Right.
hand out abortion-causing drugs, whether that's a pharmacist or a nurse, because there have been lots of cases over the years of nurses being forced to try to be part of an abortion, whether that's through their training or through whatever, and they don't want to do that. And so there's a distinction a lot of times between those who have a religious conviction versus those who have just a moral conviction, that it doesn't have to be a church or a religious organization, because everybody as an American, should have the right to their own moral convictions and
Absolutely.
not have to be forced to participate in things that, because it's not just, it goes back even to like the cake, all the Jack, whatever his name
Jack
was.
Phillips, yeah.
Yeah. And how many times they were trying to target him and force him to do something that was contrary. It's like, why are we doing this? Like, they're specifically targeting someone who they know doesn't agree with it to try to force them to do something against their beliefs. Right? Forcing a Christian school to do something that they don't want to do, or forcing a Christian baker or a Christian doctor or whatever to do something that's against. I noticed that they don't ever do this with like Muslim doctors or other religious beliefs. You know what I'm saying? Like other people who may have the same kind of issues with those things. They're specifically, a lot of times it seems like going after targeting Christians.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And of course that's foundational to democracy and the republic that we have here, is the idea that religious freedom and the ability to self-govern go hand in hand. And if in the democracy and the republic we have presupposes religious convictions, but when it does that, then you have to allow people to act according to their religious convictions, unless obviously the state has a very good compelling reason, like if your religious convictions require child sacrifice, well,
Right.
the state can step in there. But
Or polygamy or things like that,
Yeah,
where
that's right.
they've put those limits on. Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say is the most interesting part of your job?
my clients, they're just really they're so encouraging because they're taking a stand for what they believe in, and unlike most lawsuits, which are about money, this has nothing to do with money.
Right.
Most of them don't have any really damages at stake. They have their reputation at stake, that's for sure. Like Jack Phillips did
Right.
with he lost a lot of his business because he's refused to do same-sex weddings, and he eventually won, thank God.
And he was targeted more than once.
Oh,
Wasn't
yeah.
He?
At the state level and the federal level. And then Chelsea Minnick, who is the nurse practitioner midwife in near Colorado Springs, who does APR and stood up. I mean, she's just doing incredible work. She has a clinic in her home. It's a outstanding clinic. It's all set aside and it looks marvelous. People come in. She does all of her services for free or low cost. And most of the time when I talk to her, she's got someone's baby in her lap, one of her patients who needs help, or she's got an issue that they need something, and she's driving down because she has a portable ultrasound to go help them. I mean, these are the kind of people that I get to represent, and it's very encouraging and humbling at the same time. But that's the funnest and most exciting part of my job.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, and because you're, it's true though. I mean, it's an average person, right? I mean, there are people all over the country doing that kind of thing, right?
That's right.
But to be the person that is willing to say, I'm going to put all of that on the line and risk my livelihood, my reputation, all of this to fight for something that I believe in and that's important, that'll help the whole entire country, that's really noble.
It is. It's encouraging, though, it too, because it shows you that God's got a plan. He always has a remnant, and
Yes.
and we just have to be
Yes.
willing to do our part.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. Anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up? Any other cases interesting or
Well,
something?
we're hoping to do more in the area of assisted suicide. I'll just bring that
Oh,
up.
yeah.
That's a big push from on the other end of the life spectrum.
It is.
And so we've done some of those cases, and that's a lot of that is on behalf of doctors who don't want to participate in it, and they're being forced to. And so
Here in this country?
yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
'Cause I know
So-
that's a thing in a lot of like in Canada and where they're even allowing children.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, allowing children to decide that they to have an assisted
Yeah.
suicide.
Right, or worse, euthanasia, where the doctor is
Right.
actually pushing the poison into them and killing
Yeah.
them. But yeah, we won a case in California, we won a case in New Mexico, one in Vermont, and unfortunately, we can stand strong to make sure that doctors don't have to participate if they don't want to, but there are still people that are using assisted suicide and are being deceived. There's this misinformation out there that the reason why people need assisted suicide is for pain, is because they're in this, it's the humane thing to do because they're in so much pain. When, the places where they've had assisted suicide for years and years, like Oregon and Washington, that pain management is not the issue. They can manage, doctors can manage most people's pain. The issue is just a lack of hope, not wanting to be a burden. And so we've communicated to these people that you'd be better off dead instead of being a burden to your family, because look at all these thousands and millions of dollars it's going to take to keep you alive when you could take this poison and for $30 and not be a burden to your family anymore. And it's putting pressure on those people to do that. That's how diabolical it is.
Yeah, that
so
is.
we are doing our best to take a stand against it. We have some allies that are doing that too, but it's just something to be aware of. A lot of the church isn't aware that 70% of people in America think that assisted suicide is okay, because it's a misguided sense of maybe a sort of
compassion,
like compassion. Yeah.
Well, and I think that we've talked about this in other things, but that it's like Allie Beth Stuckey talks about toxic empathy. That taking, this is with the abortion issue, with LGBTQ things, with
homelessness,
with assisted suicide.
Yeah.
It's taking that and using as a weapon to push an agenda. And you can see the shift too in just the biblical worldview, and people even in churches not understanding the Word of God and not understanding the truth of God, and thinking that is, I mean, if that's 70% of people, that's going to be a lot of Christians.
Absolutely,
that think that it's okay.
Yeah, that's 70% in the church too.
Well, and the same with abortion and with some of the other issues as well. It's like not knowing and not having that solid foundation on the Word of God, that you then are subject to being deceived in those areas, and it is something. So that's why the work that you're doing is so important. And I think a lot of people don't pay attention to those kind of things. So hopefully this has been able to inform some people about what goes on in those behind the scenes. You hear about, Roe was overturned, but okay, what happened? All that leading up to it, right? All of those different things that are happening. So we appreciate you coming on.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Debbie and Sam. It's nice to meet you, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us on Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church.
You can listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify, and follow us on social media to find all the info on the show notes. To learn more about Dream City Church, visit our website at dreamcitychurch.us. Thanks for listening.